So I know you already have an idea into what we do. So what I occasionally like to do is I just scan forums like Reddit, to just get a sense of what's happening in the agile space and what's happening, product and software engineering. And
Right.
so that's just where the whole idea for this came, just get insight into all that friction. But before we begin, I'm going to read one very interesting post I saw on Reddit before we ease into our discussion topics. So this person says, this post is about 5 months ago, so it's fairly recent. The person says, story points are driving our team crazy. What estimation method actually works for you? So this is the title of the post. Then the rest of the post says, our agile team is struggling hard with story points. Half of the team thinks they are useless. The other half can't let go of them. We're spending more time arguing about whether something is a 5 or an 8 than actually building features. What estimation/planning methods have actually worked for your team? Especially curious about teams that ditch story points. What did you replace them with? Share your wins and epic fails with agile estimation. So let's come back to us. What do you think is the cause of this kind of debate? What would probably be going on that would make someone post this kind of exasperated post on Reddit?
Definitely
Yeah,
would come from a source of deep frustration. I
yeah,
understand usually with dev teams, of course, just usually the archetype of developers is
yeah,
about relatively quite process driven, I should say. And of course, with a eye on the horizon as to being able to deliver product at the end, deliver results,
yeah.
be able to showcase work.
Mhm,
So of course you're constantly getting hamstrung by something like what from their perspective is
mhm.
sheer semantics about, oh, is this no story points, especially when it's arbitrary in the team member's eye. Uh, After several sprints of that, it could feel like, hey, look, this process, this agile delivery, the subset of the process of doing actual story point estimation is all stuff that is just getting in the way of me as a developer wanting to and needing to deliver product, deliver results. So I could definitely empathize with that, and I've experienced that with multiple other dev teams where I've had one or two team members who express varying degrees of that sentiment, some even more
Yeah,
so. From my own experience, usually what we try to do as a consequence to try to, these type of topics will come up during a sprint retrospective when you're sitting there discussing with the teams, giving the teams the opportunity to be able to actually uh, vent. Of course, that's part of the retrospective. Not only reflect on the previous sprint, but also on the ability to be able to air grievances, bring up issues and concerns, and capture impediments, and with the intent of not only just being a exercise in just personal, pathological, psychological sort of release, but also to try to
mhm,
get some iterative improvement out of it and turn those into action items going forward. So for that, usually what we do then is we would actually take it upon ourselves right at the beginning of the team sort of norming and storming stage is to establish a baseline of what constitutes a 5 point story for this team. A 5 point story for Team Alpha could very likely be different for than a 5 point story for Team Beta and Team Delta. So we try to address it so that you're focusing on the actual dev team itself, your unique team, the composition of the individuals that are on it, and help set up as part of that norming stage a baseline of what we as a team feel is a 5 point story. And that too evolves over the duration of the team working together because you're developing new skill sets and familiarity and a foundation in the tech stack that the team's working with, the team dynamics with the whether it's logistics, everyone's co-located or distributed, new team management structure and team leadership. But usually the scope of a 5 point story, just to go back to this example, what would
yeah,
constitute a 5 point story at the beginning of a team's initiation and creation would be very, very different than from what a 5 point story would be what the team would deem a 5 point story, 10, 20 sprints down the road. Uh,
Yeah.
that'd be one way that I would personally and have personally tackled that type of a situation to address this type of frustration from the team members.
Okay, so in essence, you're saying people just have to learn from the work they've done in the past. So let's say if maybe API integrations, just a random example, typically takes maybe 5 days, right? So we should say, oh, we have this precedent, API integrations 5 days. So we shouldn't spend, time debating it again. We can just give it a 5 or give it a 3 based on what we've learned from the previous sprints.
Right. So exactly that
Mm-hmm.
would be it. It's kind of we're establishing benchmarks for the team.
Yeah,
And one
that's
of
the
the
word.
ways that we like to try oh, sorry, did I miss you there, Onye?
No, no, no. Benchmark was
Oh,
the word I was searching for. Yeah.
yeah. So establishing benchmarks and baselines for a team.
Mm-hmm.
So at the beginning, say it's a back end API integration story that the team's working on, and the team has said, yeah, this is going to be a 5 point story. So at the beginning, there is a significant degree of sort of arbitrariness to it because you're literally trying to pick something out of the ether, but then that value that you pick later on through agile processes, if done appropriately and successfully, they start to be, you are able to quantify that. So the way I would normally do that is where we've done a sprint planning session, and the team determined that this is our first sprint, and we're like, hey, we don't know. We're going to say this is a 5 point story. All right, no problem. 5 point story. Then at the actual sprint planning, when that story gets pulled in, because usually, maybe a week, 2 weeks have gone by since the first time that story was actually picked up and reviewed by the squad. As part of sprint planning, we'll sit there and have a discussion with product ownership and any other stakeholders who are there in sprint planning and say, okay, hey, at the time that we did this review and estimation, this was a 5 point story. In the interim, since we worked on the story last, and did the analysis and research. Has anything changed? Do we have new information? Do we have new capabilities within the team? Or have we lost some team capabilities or knowledge and manpower? And so we use the sprint planning as another session to be able
Yeah.
to check back in and determine that, yeah, you know what? Team still feels this is still a 5 point story. Based, nothing's changed. We're good. Over the course of the sprint, work continues. Dev team member picks it up. Once it gets done, we're completed. Uh, at the end of the sprint, once we've done the work, again, the idea being that during the duration of the sprint, you're having your stand-ups, you're having one-on-ones with the team members. So for in this example, if the dev team member who picked up that 5 point story brings it up and says, yeah, everything's running smoothly, exactly as we expected, that helps us to establish that foundation that, okay, yeah, you know what? This is now our 5 point story. But then at the sprint planning session for the subsequent sprint, one of the activities I like to do as an agile coach and scrum master is we do a postmortem of the work
Mhm.
that was completed in the previous sprint. We'll go through, we'll look it up. We'll say, okay, hey team, so this story that we worked on, this API integration story, we said it was a 5 point story. Team member, XYZ, you're the one who worked on it primarily. Did you encounter any surprises, any issues and impediments? If not, we're like, okay, hey, good. So then we say, okay, so based on everything you know and you've done, what we planned for, what you ended up delivering and executing, and now we're sitting on the other end of the sprint, our estimate of a 5 point story was accurate. Say yes. Like, all right, good, thumbs up. Sometimes it'll be, you know what? No, there was a heck of a lot more issues that we ran into. Once we
Mhm.
peeled back the layers of the onion and looked in, we're like, oh, there's a whole lot more integration going on. We had reliability issues. We had dependencies on other teams that we didn't know at the time when we were reviewing and estimating it. So that, along with the actual uh, overall complexity of the work, because usually when we're doing the story point estimations, it's not about duration in days or
Yeah.
hours. We want to be like the complexity of the work.
Mhm.
So if it ends up being that, hey, it was a heck of a lot more complex and this is close to an 8 point story, it's like, all right, good, now we know. So I would have this running report card every sprint where we'll sit there and say, hey, this was a 5 point story when we started and reviewed and estimated it. End of sprint. And of course, the idea being you're capturing all the content in Jira, comments, decisions, discussions, um, and ultimate findings. say, yeah, this is now this was definitely an 8 point story, then that kind of goes into sort of our lessons learned that we apply. That
Mhm.
okay, hey, you know what? Now we know. However, on the flip side, there are examples where you have the team member ask them at the end of the sprint, or you're in sprint planning, it's like, hey, that story that was 5 pointers, how was it? It's like, oh, you know what? We totally overestimated that. That was a
Yeah.
cakewalk. I was able to reuse some, experience that I had in another story on this one, the artifacts from that story, the end product we were able to implement here, and so we had to gain some efficiencies there. Uh, Team member ABC was able to jump in because they had some free cycles, and we knocked it out in no time. So yeah, that
Yeah.
was definitely more of a 2 point story. It's like, all right, good, even better. Now we know. So it's that constant sort of cadence of check and recheck and verify and re-verify with the team's input, having that dialogue and discussion back and forth, uh, that allows us to constantly calibrate what our story points are and what they're worth over the course of the sprint. If it's just that, okay, a 5 point story is a 5 point story,
Mhm.
and then you have these arguments back and forth, as you were referencing that Reddit post, uh, any tool that you use, if you don't constantly verify and calibrate and recalibrate it, will very quickly, very easily lose any meaning or value to the team. But it's that constant cadence of dialogue between the team members, product ownership, and the overall delivery team to be able to ensure that we're all figuratively and literally reading and singing off the same page. We're talking about the same thing. So it's like we don't lose the context of what 5 points means, what 8 points mean, what 13 points mean.
Thanks, Samir. I like that. So at the core of everything is constant dialogue with the team. So it's
Absolutely.
not really about the tools, but it's about the dialogue happening in the team.
Right.
Right. So
Absolutely.
perfect.
I mean, software development, any work, but software development especially,
Mm,
is it's a very social sort of undertaking and endeavor. You can't do
mhm.
it. I mean, yes, sorry, I take that back. You can go off into a silo and go do the work, but it could
Mm,
very well be that what you were working on, because you went off in a silo, you didn't have any discussions or
mm,
interactions, and then you come out at the end, what you end up producing could be very different from what was requested by the stakeholder.
yeah,
So by having those constant touch points that are part of agile delivery, uh, the stand-ups, the sprint planning, the
mm,
backlog refinement sessions, the backlog grooming sessions, one-on-one dialogue between product ownership and subject matter experts within the team. Without those, I'm sorry, you need those all to ensure that you are actually all in sync and being able to deliver. And that's where you have those discussions, but just like anything else, unless it's
yeah,
captured and documented somewhere, uh, it's very quick to forget about stuff or lose stuff and fall through the cracks. And that's where stuff like
yeah,
using Jira definitely help, because it becomes a artifact, a source of record to capture not only requirements but documentation, discussions, and just regular sort of day-to-day delivery on what the status is of the work.
yeah. Okay. I like that. Thank you. So I have just let's move to the next question. So the topic is it's estimation still relevant for product and engineering teams. Yeah. So one question I want to start with is in your view, like this is really an opinionated question. I want to hear what you think. Do you think software estimation is it flawed? Do you think it's just something it's flawed, we need to retire it, but we keep trying to make it work? Or do you just think that it is perfect, but we're just misusing it for some reasons unknown to us? What do you think is
So,
the problem?
so the problem is, and I believe I've already sort of touched upon it, is that
Mm-hmm.
it, in order for the tool to be of value, everyone needs to
Yeah,
have buy-in on the tool
yeah, mm,
or the benchmark or the baseline. So if
yeah,
everybody agrees And of course, to have
Mm-hmm.
agreement, you have to have discussion, uh,
Yeah.
perhaps some confrontation, some conflict management, but ultimately
Mm-hmm.
discussion and if need be negotiation to be able to come to a common
Mm-hmm.
understanding. Once you have that
Yeah.
common understanding, then the tool and everybody has an agreement upon that, hey, that's a 5 point story, or hey, what we're all looking at, what we're all working on is the delivery of a car.
Mm-hmm.
As long as everybody knows what you're doing together, then sort of the idea of, in this example, using story points, it's not an issue. It's much less likely to be an issue, is what I should say. You're still going to have
Yeah.
holdouts, team members who, might maybe hesitant and wanting to. Still, they will have reservations. It's human nature because opinions and thoughts, of course, everybody has
Mm-hmm.
their own when it comes to personal and professional endeavors. But
Mm-hmm.
that's where, again, communication, interaction, and conversation is key.
Yeah.
So by actually going upstream, so it's in this, it's sort of in your question, the way I interpret it is you're asking me if the tool that is being used in this point, estimation, story point estimation, is flawed.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I
Yeah.
prefer to go one or two steps further upstream from the whole process of
Mm-hmm.
using the points, is in
Mm-hmm.
having the conversation and hopefully establishing consensus that once we get to the point of using the tool, again, in this example, story points,
Mm-hmm.
everybody has an agreement upon it, that we all know
Yeah.
that, hey, we all agreed based on discussion and exchange that we had and have continued to have. We all understand what an 8 point story is. We all understand what a 3 point story is. And that's where the arena of sort of using the sessions of backlog grooming sessions and product backlog refinement and estimation sessions, you're creating the time box, usually anywhere from 90 minutes to even 3 hours, depending on how big and
Yeah.
deep the backlog of work is, to have that dedicated time for exchange and discussion, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
establish that this is the scope of work, this is what we all agree upon. Once that is agreed
Mm-hmm.
upon, if it's at the beginning of the creation of the team, we would decide that, hey, yeah, that's a 5 point story, an 8 point story, or if it's at the, in the interim stages where the team is starting to sort of hit its groove, that's where we
Mm-hmm.
do relative sizing and we say, okay, hey, previous 3 sprints, these are what our 5 point stories look like. Would we say this is more complex than that, or less complex, or about equal complexity? So we're using the team's own history of work and
Mm-hmm.
delivery to help establish and benchmark future work.
Yeah.
Because again, it allows you to the team to democratize the entire interaction and exchange, because you are using their own input, not only uh, verbally through the interaction, the communication, but also through the using their own work product of what they delivered and presented to the team and the stakeholders, so they understand that, yeah, you know what, we all agreed that this was a 5 point story. These are what examples of our
Mm-hmm.
5 point stories are. So now that we know that that's what a 5 point story is, knowing what we know now, this next story that we're reviewing, refining, and estimating is, relatively speaking, again, back to relative sizing, equivalent amount of work and complexity, perhaps more complexity because we have a whole bunch more unknowns, or just it's going to require a heck of a lot more manpower and time and research, or less complex. So again,
Oh.
by doing all those
Okay.
exercises and activities, I feel you kind of cut off that discussion at the pass, so to speak, about
Yeah.
using story points, whether it's a flawed system or not.
Okay, thank you for that. So there was something I wanted to ask. So when we were speaking earlier, you said something around if the entire team gets buy-in, right? And then I wanted to ask, I mean, you
Right.
have decades of experience as an agile coach and yeah. So when have you ever seen a scenario where, everyone in the team, there is no consensus, everyone in the team doesn't buy into the idea of estimation? And when that happens, what do you think is the path forward, like the way forward to get everyone on board? And I'm asking this from an angle of, I guess there would naturally be skeptics, maybe people who have been burned in the past from estimation, and maybe they move to a new team and they don't want to, they just have reservations. If
Right.
someone, maybe a product leader, is faced with that, how do you get everyone, to buy into the idea?
So in that, for the example of this instance here,
Yeah.
um, on a personal level, I will say, fortunately,
Hmm.
I have never encountered a situation where the entire team is in disarray.
Yeah.
Um, how the reason being, like,
Hmm.
when I say disarray, in the sense that nobody agrees on anything, that
Yeah.
because again, my own experience is inevitably you will have at least one dev team member, possibly even two,
Hmm.
for whom the area of knowledge required to review, refine, discuss, and estimate that work is something either A, they have experience in, or B, expertise in and
Hmm.
understanding, or C, they're able to wrap their head around the core concept of what is being requested by the stakeholder. So in those instances, usually, again, the intent being when you're having your backlog refinement and backlog grooming sessions, uh, you leverage that expertise, that passion of that team member, and allow them to, spearhead the dialogue about what it is being asked. Allow them to serve as that central point of, knowledge and discussion, so that all the team members are engaging and be able to have the questions and the discussion. Now, one of the things that we've usually experienced, or again, I should say, I've experienced, was as part of our sort of setting up and team norming process, as part of our team
Yeah.
agreement, team contract, etc.
Mhm.
One of the things we would establish right at the beginning is that, what is, again, your definition of ready and definition of done. Now, as part of our definition of ready, we would agree that, hey, it needs to have the following, and it's, again, done through a democratic discussion with the whole squad of what is the minimum requirement we need to be able to pull work in to our backlog and before it's ready to be reviewed and estimated by the team. As part of that, one of the things we'd often discuss, we established, is that, so for example, we would have 90-minute sessions bookmarked twice a sprint, every sprint, for backlog grooming. And we would say that we'd establish that if the discussion around a story went longer than, on one team it was 12 minutes, on another team it was 15 minutes. If we're sitting there for 15 minutes and there's still back and forth and going on and everyone's got questions, concerns, problems with it, that's when we decide that's our cutoff. And as a squad, based upon the team agreement, we determine that, hey, look, the fact that our discussion on this work went more than 15 minutes, that's a sign, as far as we're concerned, that that the product owner needs to take the story back to the stakeholder and get further clarity, further information that will assist the team in being able to, again, review, refine, and estimate the work. Or, if need be,
Yeah.
in sort of backburner that story for a subsequent refinement session and have the stakeholder, the project stakeholder who's asking for that work, to come and explain in their own words what they're looking for. Because, again, communication and dialogue, that is what is key. The
Yeah.
Rather than introducing layers of sort of, barriers almost in terms of the communication between the dev team who's going to do the work and the stakeholder who's requested the work, provide a forum and bring them all together. And then that's where we would have that and pull it in. So again, it would be one of those situations where, in your example, where, that you said perhaps the team sitting there and saying, nobody agrees on the work, nobody agrees on the effort. Ideally, that would come out in the discussion in this
Yeah.
example, that 15-minute time box that the team agreed upon, that, hey, once we hit the threshold of 15 minutes, we're kicking this one back because we can't take it in
Yeah.
right now because there's too many unknowns. And
Yeah.
ideally, during those 15 minutes, you are capturing the points of contention, the questions, the concerns, uh, things that need further clarification. And then that allows you to take it back and have the product owner take it back to the stakeholder, or bring the stakeholder in to have that discussion and address those points of contention. So again, as I said, I haven't experienced what based personally what you were asking me there in your question about the whole team being like nobody agrees, but what I have found is the process that I have many years of experience in doing has been tried and true. And
Mhm.
again, it comes down to communication and dialogue and bringing
Yeah.
the appropriate people into the appropriate forums to
Mhm.
capture uh, questions and decisions.
Yeah, I like that. I love what you said about time boxing your discussions. If it exceeds 15 minutes, then you know that there's a clarity problem. You need to bring in the product owner. Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate,
Mm-hmm.
that 15-minute example that I used, that's not
Yeah.
something that I, as a scrum master or the product owner, decided. That was a team discussion. That's like, hey
Yeah.
guys, we've kind of figured out that the way we're trending is once we've figured out after 12 minutes of back and forth and we still don't have enough information we feel or comfort and confidence to be able to estimate the work,
Yeah.
that's our cutoff. One team was
Yeah.
12 minutes, another was 15, another was 20.
Yeah. But the primary thing is you just have to time box those conversations. You get it?
Exactly.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Then something else I want us to talk about. So again, let's just come down to story points now. So from what we know about story points, it's just a way for you to, estimate effort, relative effort, okay? But
Yes.
then from all the conversations, just reading through Reddit posts, one thing I realized is that for a couple of teams, it has become some kind of, performance metric, right? So what I want to
Yes.
ask now is, now again, based on your experience, apart from maybe using story points as a performance metric, right? Or let me just put it this way. Okay, using story points as a performance metric, how does this, breed mistrust and anxiety in the, engineering team? What's the downsides? What are the consequences of adopting story points as a performance metric? And then on the other hand, how can they move away from this? Yeah.
Right. So the first, again, from experience, the first
Mm,
sort of discussion would be is who is, and it's usually an external stakeholder,
yeah.
who is viewing the team's sprint metrics. What are they hoping to achieve by viewing those sprint metrics? What results are they looking to be able to communicate or sort of communicate and or disseminate to either their stakeholders or their peers with regards to the delivery of the work? And that's where it would be the job of the product owner, program sponsor, and the scrum master and agile delivery lead and coach to have those conversations. The dev team's role and responsibility should be to just focus on the work.
Mhm.
It's that other component of the team, all those team members I mentioned, to
Yeah.
determine who is viewing those metrics and why are they being used as a benchmark for team performance. So that requires communication and discussion to occur. Usually, again, from personal experience, there's a way to be able to ensure that all who are looking for that information, we're able to give them a more accurate representation of the work that's being delivered, what is to satisfy their needs. Because it's human nature. You're like, I want to look at a number. Last week, the team said 50. 2 weeks later in the sprint, team said 70. Oh, third sprint, third week, team now delivered 25. Oh no, the team's their output is going down. What's going on? But that's just a snapshot from the outside looking in. There's no context to those numbers, to those metrics, which is why those metrics are used ideally within the confines of a delivery team to sort of loosely benchmark and baseline the team's overall health when it comes to cohesion and delivery, but not as a cudgel or to sit there and beat them over the head with. It's like, what's going on? You guys, why are you slipping? No,
Yeah.
ideally, the scrum master and the product owner sitting in the day to day, having the interactions and the exchange and communication, and has the context.
Yeah.
So that's why, again, personal practice. We use the story points, the throughput, and the burn down as items to base sort of trends of the team's throughput and delivery, and have conversations and communication back and forth within the delivery squad to be able to see what's going on. If we start to see a trend that, hey, our average velocity for moving average for the last 3 sprints, we're sitting at about 57 points. So we took in during sprint planning about 55 points worth of work or 50 points worth of work to give ourselves a little bit of a buffer. But then all of a sudden we only delivered 20. It's like, okay, what happened? We're having this communication, the conversation. Again, anyone outside the team looking at those numbers, it's they don't have context. So all they see is a number, they take it out and they will take it out of context. And if they are individuals who just need that metric and are not looking to have the communication and conversation, well, then that's another issue that needs to be addressed, but not by the dev team, but by the team leadership to
Yeah.
address that. The story points themselves, again, are just so that we understand, we see how the team is trending. It's kind of like weather forecasting, right? You can be
Yeah.
like, yeah, this is roughly where we stay in around this time of year. This is roughly what we deliver during the Q1, Q2, Q3. This is how we're trending. This is how we forecast our work. Uh, an example, just to give you, is where it was kind of negative. We were working with an external agile coach on one of my teams who came in. We had 2 dev teams and we were onboarding a third dev team, 5 devs and 3 QAs on each of those dev teams as part of that program's delivery. And we decided, you know what, we're going to do a reset and have a sprint zero, and we're going to have multiple days of reestablishing the team norms, agreements, and looking at backlog and looking at the scope of work, all that sort of stuff. During those discussions, one of the things that came up was the team program sponsor was a huge proponent of the squad, fiercely protected his squad, believed in their ability to deliver and do great work, and espoused as such to all of his audience, his stakeholders at his level and higher. That yeah, this is a high performance team. They deliver phenomenally consistently. Someone brought that up as part of the discussion during those that ramp up for Sprint Zero. Said, well, this is a high performing team. We deliver 55 points of work every sprint. And this is what caused the uproar to the point where it derailed the entire day's conversation. That agile coach said, that's not a high performing team. High performing teams deliver 70, 75, 80 points of work. You guys only deliver 50. That, frankly, pissed off so many of my senior devs that they literally, 2 of them hung up because we were doing it all remotely. This was during COVID. They hung up, got off the call. I had to jump off, have one-on-ones with them, discuss. Hey, you know what? Let's bring it back. Let's placate them, bring them back into the fold, have the discussion. And we said, you know what? Let's put a pin in this for today. And then with the dev team and the product ownership team, we had an entire offline discussion around that. And one of my senior dev team members, I remember him saying, he said, "Oh, okay, they don't think our 55 points a sprint is high performing team because that's what our work is. Guess what? All our 8 point stories are now 13 points.
Yeah.
So look at that. There you go. We hit our point metric, and we're like, that's like, I know what you're saying. I understand, but that's an anti-pattern. We don't want to be doing that. We don't want to be purposefully sandbagging.
Mhm.
So again, it's in that example, the there was a huge risk of the
Yeah.
understanding and trust that was built within the team to be broken because an external party who, in theory, had a lot of experience and expertise in agile delivery, team dynamics, and Scrum came in and made a comment like that in that forum. And I always think of that example as one. It's like, because even there used to be a point where, as part of our sprint demos, we used to actually share. It's like, oh, hey, here's our velocity. Here's what our backlog health is looking like. Here's how many points we delivered this sprint. Here's how many points we delivered last sprint. Here's what our moving average is, et cetera, et cetera. Here's our burn down. And then the team members themselves voiced, they're like, hey, you know what? We say this all the time, that our metrics are unique to us, and that also, without context, they can and will be misinterpreted, because we used to send out a PowerPoint deck or a Google presentation to everybody with that information in it, because it was added into our meeting calendar invite. Said, we don't want that information out there anymore, because we've seen it bite us in the butt, and you know what, you're right. Nobody needs to know what the team's outside the team. Nobody needs to know what the numerical value is of our moving average, our burn down, our throughput. That is unique
Yeah.
to us. So we will,
Yeah.
from here on out, only keep it internal. So we removed it
Yeah.
from our sprint demo with the team's input, team agreement, and we even shared that as part of our next demo, saying, "Hey, just so you guys know, I know we used to share this information, at part of that, but we have determined that if that this is not providing value, truly intrinsic value to our stakeholders, because this information is unique to the squad. If anyone is looking for any sort of performance information with regards to the team, please reach out to myself, product owner A, product owner B, program manager, when we're happy to give you any information you need about the team's overall performance.
Yeah.
But we will no longer be sharing it,
Yeah.
out of, again, because it could be taken on con, but also out of respect and respecting the team's request, because the team
Yeah.
themselves said, you know what, we don't feel this is fair to us. So that was an example right there.
Yeah. Thank you for that example. So we have just one question left, but before I
Sure.
ask the last question, I just want to dig a bit deeper into something you said in passing. So you said most times when stakeholders start relying on, story points as a performance metric, it's usually because they're looking for some kind of data, to use and gauge teams' performance. Now, since we've agreed that story points should not be used to gauge a team's performance, okay? So so if a stakeholder wants to say, oh, how do I know if this squad is a highly productive squad? Apart from the story points, what else should they look for or look at, to use in gauging how productive, engineering productivity and all that. Yeah.
Benchmark the team against what they committed to.
Okay. Yeah.
So to further elaborate upon that,
Mm-hmm.
as part of the style of delivery that the teams I worked with at as a major Canadian financial institution up here,
Yeah.
what we basically implemented some, but not all, of the aspects of safe delivery. So safe, scaled agile for enterprise.
Yeah.
And as part of that, we did what you call PI planning, right? Your planning increment.
Yeah.
Our PIs kind of loosely corresponded with fiscal quarters, usually plus or minus a few days. But we'd have 4 PIs per fiscal year.
Yeah.
And there was an entire run up and exercise in research and organization prior to our PI planning sessions, which involved in-depth discussions between product owners and team members and program owners and managers,
Mm-hmm.
and then as to what our team was being relied upon to deliver. So then all that was created. It was up to our product owner to sit there and create our roadmap for the PI. And as part of our PI planning session, which would usually be, for some squads, it was multiple days. My squad, we could knock it out in a full day. Like, we're starting at 9 a.m. and we're ending at 3 p.m. with a lunch break in there. And we would lay out our roadmap of saying, here's our top 3 objectives that we will be working towards during this planning increment. And this is based upon many, many discussions and interactions with our stakeholders. And so this is what we agree upon. This is what we're going to be delivering. So we'd have our PI objectives, our top three, top five, and we'd even have our stretch objectives saying it's like, hey, if we can really stretch it out, we will go even further. And then we would say, as part of that work, here are the epics in the team's Jira backlog that cover this scope of work. And then in those epics, we'd have our sometimes all the stories as part of the epic, or maybe a subset of those stories. And we'd have a giant plan laid out that would be an extraction from Jira. We'd use a component of Jira called Jira just plans, and allows you to map out that work over the time. And so what we would do as part of this exercise is we say, here's our top objectives, here's our stretch objectives. As a concept, as a subset of those, in order to deliver upon those objectives, here are the list of epics that we're going to be working upon. And as part of those epics, here are all the stories that satisfy that epic. And over the course of that planning increment, so usually it was about 12 weeks, we'd have 6 sprints. And we would have this giant map put out in front of everybody saying, here's what we're committing to for PI2 or Q2, whatever. Here's the work by the sprint. And so that is what would be used as a benchmark and a report card on the team's ability to deliver. What did we agree to and commit to at the beginning of that increment or quarter? How we are trending upon the delivery of that work, and ultimately at the end of it, how we endeavored and ended up completing that work. Now, it's not just a snapshot that beginning of the quarter, end of the quarter, beginning of the PI, end of the PI. Every one of our sprint planning sessions, we would be revisiting our plan, the team's actual delivery plan for the quarter, for the PI. And then every one of our system demos where we'd have our stakeholders and we'd say, here's the work that we delivered. The team finished this work during this last sprint. And this is how it fits and rolls up into the higher level objectives that we have defined. So it's again back to as cliche as it sounds, it comes
Yeah.
back to communication. We are constantly communicating to our not only internally to our team when we're doing our planning and we're discussing it's like, hey, this work that we're pulling in the sprint, it needs to be brought in because it rolls up towards objective number 2 that we committed to, and the following other teams are relying upon us to deliver, and that's why it's being pulled in now, and that's why it is high priority. And then so we do that during the sprint planning with the team, and during the demo, we do that again with our team and our stakeholders, letting them know that, hey, the work that the team just completed in this last sprint, while we're going to put on the dog and pony show for you guys and being able to see you showcase what the team worked on. Here is the step. We're going to step back and look at the bigger picture, the proverbial 50,000-foot view on what value is that team, our dev team, delivering in this last sprint and how it fits into the bigger picture. And so that way, if we've got senior level leadership, stakeholders, and program sponsors who want to know how the team is doing,
Yeah.
rather than getting down into the weeds and being like, hey, they only delivered 50 points this sprint where they normally deliver 70, they can step back and look at the plan saying, hey, over the quarter, this is what we committed to delivering. How are they trending? What has moved? What is slipping? So it's that sort of that higher program level view almost that assists in giving the macro level trends that the team is following and how it translates into the overall delivery to what the team committed to and whether or not the stakeholder is going to get what they need at the end of the period. Does that help out? Does that answer?
Perfectly. Perfect. Thank you so much, Sammy. We've been here for
Yep.
15 minutes. So thank you. I wanted to ask one more question, but I think this is okay. Or do you have 5 more minutes to spare? I can quickly just add a
Absolutely.
question before we. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So again, I may be wrong because I'm not an agile coach or a scrum master, but this was just a personal, opinion I have after reading series of posts. Yeah. So it seems so what I just noticed was it's almost as though all the resistance, around story points come from engineers. And on the other hand, we have product managers pushing, just from my Reddit post, again, I may be wrong. This is just, me giving my opinion on what I read. Yeah. So it's almost
Right.
like the dev guys are hesitant, and then the product people are in for a kind of number. And at the end of the day, it kind of sours the relationship a bit. Okay. So if a team comes to a point where the relationship, the communication between the dev guys and the product guys are not where it's supposed to be. You said so much about communication being the bedrock of delivery and everything. So if a team comes to a point where the product guys and there's a bit of tension between the products people and then the engineering guys, how do you think they can just resolve in around estimation and story points? How do you think they can, just resolve that tension and deliver on their commitments?
The mistrust that a dev team member would have in the story points
Yeah.
is would usually stem from a place where they perhaps feel that their input, their expertise, and insight is not valued.
Okay.
And the way to circumvent that is to ensure that they are, again, back to communication, they are involved. They need to be
Yeah.
active participants in every stage and step of the team's overall agile delivery.
Okay.
Because if the team, if the dev team member is sitting here saying, is like, hey, this is an 8 point story, and somehow their input wasn't taken into consideration and they got railroaded by whether it's the team or product ownership saying, hey, if the product owner comes in and says, hey, I know you said this is an 8 point story, but I really need this to be a 5 point story. Well, then that's where me as the sort of, the servant leader, and team member want to come and say, like, hey, what are you trying to achieve by telling someone this is a 5 point story instead of an 8 point story? Jonathan, our senior level dev, says this is an 8 point story. Why are you not trusting what he is saying? Or what are you trying to achieve by telling him to drop his estimate?
Yeah.
And again, having that discussion and having, in this example, our senior dev, Jonathan, be brought into the conversation so that they have that one on one and that ability to have behind the scenes, off the record conversation with the product ownership and myself and the dev manager, perhaps. It's just like, hey, what is going on here? What is the root cause for the disconnect? Where perhaps Jonathan feels that his input is not being valued, so he thinks story points are garbage. It's like, forget it. You guys don't listen to me anyway. Or while my product owner, Samantha, says, hey, I really need that to win story. Well, Samantha, please explain what value do you gain? Or what objective are you trying to achieve by having this be a 5 point story? Oh, I need to tell my stakeholder it's a 5 point story. Why are you telling your stakeholder it's a 5 point story? Our story points are unique to us. What does your stakeholder gain by learning that the work that the team's working on, that Jonathan says is an 8 point story, you went and told him it's a 5 point story? That stakeholder has no context. Again, personal experience. It'll be, well, the stakeholder wants to know how we're trending. Then I'll be like, okay, you know what? Let's redirect them. Bring them to me. Bring them, you, me, the dev manager, the program manager. We can walk them through our roadmap and show them how we're doing. They don't need to watch the grass grow every day. They don't need to watch the paint dry every day to make sure that they know progress is happening. They need to see results. They
Yeah.
need to see the delivery of value. Are is the stakeholder receiving the value that they are expecting from us? Is the dev team delivering the value that we have committed to? So again, in that situation, I would say once again, I would want to not go right at the problem of the story points are of no value. I would want to go one or two levels further upstream and be like, okay, what is driving the discussion and the work to the point where there's a disconnect in the story points value between team members, and as a consequence, now the whole team is saying there's no point in doing these estimations because they don't mean anything. They do mean something within the context of the team because the team defines it,
Yeah.
and that's a democratic, more or less, process. There's a discussion, the exchange, interaction that happens. So again, hopefully, if the team has done their job in providing the input, and the product ownership and leadership and the agile leads have done their job, ideally the team doesn't get to the point where they say story points are useless.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you so much, Samir. It's been quite an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
spending 58 minutes with us. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Have a lovely day. Yep. Bye
You're
bye.
welcome. All right. Thank you very
Yeah.
much, man. Bye bye.
Same here. Bye.